Our goal in Pivot is to help make your experience and your journey into patient research advocacy as inspiring and rewarding as you want it to be. You can choose how much you want to be involved. If you want to just learn, that's fine. If you want to be more involved, you can be as involved as you want to be. It's all up to you, and we're here to help you. So to start off things, I've got to recognize this young woman, and you saw her earlier. She is at home recovering from surgery and dying by the fact that she's not able to be here with us. She has been instrumental in pulling this together for you all. So give her a round of applause. This is Sarah Douglas. And if you choose to become involved with this in Pivot, she'll become your new best friend. So she's a wonderful person who's been able to really help us keep our feet to the fire to bring this whole event to you today. And she keeps us organized at Pivot. So anyway, there are many types of advocacy, and it's easy to get confused. And I've been and still am involved in all of these forums, and they all do kind of feed into what I'm able to do as a research advocate. But what I do as a research advocate also feeds into all of these. But what we're focusing on in Pivot, what we are here today, is to be a research advocate. And that's to bring our patient voices and perspectives about what it's like to live with cancer into the research decision-making process. And you've heard a little bit from Jen and a little bit from Danny about why that is important, but that's what Pivot is all about. So who are patient research advocates? Well, we're the previvors, those who are at high risk of cancer. We're the survivors of cancer, and we're the co-survivors. So Kristen, I believe it was, you said you're a supporter. You're a co-survivor. You're a family and friend caregiver of someone who's been diagnosed with cancer. And we all have lived experiences with cancer. We know what it's like to live 24/7 with this disease. And we know it's a bunch of, starts with an S and ends with a T. But we have lived cancer experiences. We're committed to representing the patient concerns and perspectives. And not just ours, because we're tied to the broader community of survivors and co-survivors. Even if you're not formally engaged in like an advocacy group like Komen, aren't you getting, how many people get calls from friends and family who get diagnosed? So, you know, you're connected, you hear the stories, you work with people as they're going through these. And one of the things that I've found to be totally rewarding about being a cancer research advocate is I'm a better resource for my friends and family who are then diagnosed, or their friends and family that are diagnosed. I will caution you, however, that you need to know what you're an expert at and what you're not. So first of all, none of us are scientists, none of us are clinicians, so when somebody calls you and said, my doctor recommended such and such, is that good? No, I can't answer that. What I have to say is, you know, if you have concerns, I would totally encourage you to get a second opinion. And any doctor who doesn't want you to get a second opinion, I'd think twice about them. But get a second opinion. So I also want to encourage you in your journeys, whether it be as a patient research advocate or a survivor, just helping another survivor, be careful about telling people what they need to do or what's best for them. We can suggest, we can recommend, we can say what we found helpful, but everybody's journey is different. Everybody's journey is unique, and we have to support people where they are and where they want to go. So we're able, because of our connections with others, to provide a collective patient experience. You know not only what it's like for you and your loved one, you know what it's like for others that are going through this. So it's your expertise. One of the things that research advocates believe sometimes is, I have to be an expert in science. No! Absolutely not. Not even all the scientists are experts in science, because as we, Danny, and you'll agree with me, that as they get more and more precise in what they're studying, they know less about what someone else is studying. So they find problems with somebody else's jargon as much as we do with them. So it's not unusual for you not to understand. What's key is you are able to ask questions, and you bring your own lived cancer experience, insights, and wisdom, and we have to talk up on behalf of all patients. So yes, it really is all about us. It's about our lives, our experience, our insights and wisdoms, and what we want to have come from cancer, our journey, and for future survivors and co-survivors. And I want to re-stress this again. How many of you have seen or read a book about a doctor who's suddenly diagnosed with a disease, and oh my gosh, he's overwhelmed with just how much he thought he knew that he didn't know, and how much he really doesn't know, even though he interacted with patients all the time. Anybody hear about those books? So once again, that proves just how much we bring to the conversation, even though sometimes clinicians and researchers think they know what patients want. They really don't unless they've already walked in those shoes. And the head of one of the national organizations who's really promoting patient engagement will say, even if you're a researcher who's been diagnosed with cancer, your perspective's different because you're in the system. You really don't know what it's like for somebody who's not in the system. And that's true. So keep in mind, we are the experts. We're the champions. Our voices matter. And so you say, okay, well, our voices matter. Why is it whenever I talk to a researcher, I feel like this? Well, the problem is that researchers have been so ingrained in their everyday language about mitochondria and DNA and RNA and tRNA and TTRA, blah, 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 blah. So, but they don't even understand when they're using jargon. And I will swear, as a cancer research advocate, I sometimes use jargon because I've become comfortable with it and think everybody knows it. Then I have friends like Kim and Debbie that go, and Melanie that go, what do you mean? What does that mean? So we even can get into the jargon mode. So anyway, our ability in our part of what we do is help bring real life and everyday language to research. So one of the things that you would do as a patient research advocate is help researchers explain what is their research all about in everyday terms and why is it important to patients. And we also help them understand where their language is not quite the same as ours. They have different definitions for the same word. For instance, start yelling out, what do you think the word cure means? Anybody got a... Oh, you're clean. You're clean. Never have it again. Any other thoughts? You're clean for now. So clean for now, won't ever have it again. Well, a lot of patients believe that the word cure means we'll never get it again. I don't have to worry about it anymore. Well, unfortunately, when you talk to a researcher or even a clinician, when they use the word cure, they mean you have at least a 5-year cancer survivor rate on average. So I don't know about you, but I still hope to live longer than 5 years. So that's not really a cure for me. So we have to help researchers understand where their language is miscommunicating things, and clinicians as well. So what else do patient advocates do? Well, Jen basically touched on this before. There's all different types of research. We have basic research, which is, actually I would like to call it fundamental or foundational research, because if you don't have this knowledge about how cells work and how they interact with the environment, how cancer cells are different than normal cells, you can't really figure out how we're going to change things. So it's the foundation, and it's the stuff that's done in the lab. And preclinical research is kind of like a transition where you start working with, and when you say animal models, it's not this kind of model. It's models, animal models are like mice that have been specially created to mimic like breast cancer. So they act like a certain type of breast cancer. So you do experiments in the mice, thank God for mice that are willing to do these things, that can then test out, will this really work? But just because it works in a mouse, because if it worked in a mouse and we had it for us, we'd be cured by now. Just because it works in a mouse doesn't mean it'll work in humans. So sometimes they'll test it in a petri dish with human breast cancer cells, for instance. But still, you don't know until you put it into a real person, and that's where the phases of clinical trials come in. And that's where we get to clinical research, which is with patients in the clinic. And then we also have population health, which is all about what's done in the community and how we improve the overall community. And yes, you can be involved as much as you want to in any of these. And one of the things you need to keep in mind is you can choose where you want to be involved, how you want to be involved, and we're here to help you, guide you in how to get to the place you want to be. But again, it is your choice. And again, I want to say over and over, we need you to feed back to us what's important to you, what you're learning, what you're not learning, what you want to learn, how this is meeting that. So let us know. So you can be involved in any of these, but basically roles that go across all of the types of research is we can help develop research goals that are important to patients. And we've had both Jen and Danny touch on that. We can review a proposed project, one that's going in for a grant. How well does it address patient needs and concerns? And we can write a letter of support for a research study. And that really does help researchers get funded, good research get funded. If a patient's saying, hey, this is important and this is why it's important. And by the way, in Pivot, we have a template for you to use, so you don't have to just create this all on your own. And the first time you write a letter of support, we can be there to help mentor you along. Or maybe the second time, a third time, whatever. But after I save them so I can go back and borrow from previous ones. We can help and develop educational materials that go out to patients or the public. We can help researchers, as I've said time and time again, effectively share their research with the public audiences, with patient audiences. And we can share the importance and impact of cancer research for patients. We aren't going to have better ways to prevent, diagnose, treat, or cure cancer, or any other disease for that matter, without research. So it's fundamentally important. And advocate roles, specifically in clinical trials, which Jen covered a lot about, is we have to be there to ensure that the informed consent document and process are really geared towards patients. And so you would be reading the document that if a patient wants to participate in a clinical trial, they have to sign an informed consent, which goes through what is this trial about and what are the risks and benefits, and they sign this document, and there's a process of talking about it. So we have to ensure that that really is easy to follow and understand, that clearly outlines what the trial is about, and that also clearly states the risks and benefits. We can improve the recruitment of participants by making sure that the question being asked is one that patients really find important. I mean, sometimes researchers will have these interesting questions, but they're not so interesting to us. And so we can help them understand what is important to us and what is being required or expected of the participants. Is it doable in real life? And it this is kind of interesting because sometimes, for instance, you might have a research project that's being done here in Kansas City, and they want to recruit rural Kansans, but they expect them to come into the clinic once a week. I don't think it's going to happen. No, we can't expect people to travel miles. And even in Kansas City, for many Kansas Cityans, it's not always easy to participate because our clinical trial centers like Westwood and the one over in Fairway are not located on bus routes. So people have problems with transportation. And then there's the whole issue about comfort and being familiar and making it easy for patients. So what is doable in real life? I remember one trial that I was helping develop, and she was going to have everybody do a 24-hour urine assessment, which means you get to carry around a jug and pee in it all the time. So how many of you would like to do that? It takes a lot of commitment. Well, we were actually able to work with her, and she made it 8 hours. Great, I can do that overnight. So sometimes it's just a matter of helping them understand what is really doable, because they're trying to make the most precise research possible, so they are for sure that they're answering the question. We need to make sure materials are easy to understand and appealing. And then advocate roles for basic and preclinical research. So Jen started to touch on this, and I work with Danny in the postdocs in his lab all the time. And postdocs are I call them young investigators in training, the young researchers in training. These are the guys and gals that are developing to be researchers, and we need to encourage them as much as we can, because bless their hearts, they go into a grant application with a 1 in 10 chance that they're going to be successful. I mean, that's how competitive grant research is. So what we do with these young folks, and Danny too, we figure out what are analogies that can be used, like spaghetti, pasta, and what are the different ways that we can explain in real life terms these vague concepts that they're talking about. We help them understand that what they are talking about, when you talk with them, they get all excited and their eyes are just sparkling, and you're going, what are you saying? And you can see the excitement, and you just work with them, and then they get excited about also figuring out ways that they can start talking English again. So we help these young physicians, investigators, researchers, and this is a well-seasoned one, keep the focus of the patient in mind and heart. We bring the face and sense of urgency to basic research. By adding our voices, we help them understand what patients are going through, why their work is important. I remember one of the researchers I brought to the Komen Promise Lunch, the Susan G. Komen Breast Cancer Promise Lunch, and they asked all the survivors to stand up, and all these people stood up, and she got chills. She says, I have never really seen what potential impact my research could have. I mean, you hear the numbers, but seeing the people are another thing. Seeing the people, hearing the stories, hearing what matters, and hearing that your work that you're doing is important to us makes all the difference in the world.